Hey guys, real quick before the video starts, I just want to mention that this was originally going to be a premium course for our Patreon members, but I decided to release it here on YouTube for free just because a lot of you guys liked the last one. So it's going to be a multi-part series. I'm going to show you the full process of modeling, triangulation, unwrapping, high to low poly decimation, rendering, texturing, and post-processing, and presenting it for your portfolio. So I'm going to show you literally A to Z how to go through this process. So it'll be a multi-part series, so sit back and enjoy it. Second of all, make sure you guys grab our hard surface ebook. It's free. A lot of people still don't know it's out there and exists. It's like a lot of really detailed content, just different hard surface techniques. It's good as a reference guide and just overall a really good resource to have. You can get it on our website for free. Link is in the description. Other than that, let's go ahead and hop right into this multi-part series. So we're going to start with a cube, and I just want to basically get the general size down for this piece, right? Well, the first thing I want to make is the door. So I want the door to be, we'll just press S, Z, and then scale it up maybe this high, and then a bit on the X. And this is just kind of like an arbitrary size. I'm just kind of playing with it and see what looks good. And what we can also do is scale this on the y-axis, SY, or SX. I like pressing the 3 key on the numpad, so we'll do S and X, and then we're just going to make this one pretty thin. We can always adjust it later, but for now this should be okay. And I'll just press Control A and apply the scale. It's a bit too skinny, so I'm going to scale this up just a bit more, I think. A bit higher. Just kind of looking at it and just visually trying to picture kind of how I want this to look. Alright, this will be fine. Doesn't have to be perfect. Trust me, we can always tweak that later. What I do want to do, however, is trace out the general form of the door. So one thing we discuss in this design course, which I'm also going to try to cover in here as well, is you don't want to picture the final product in your head. That's really difficult to do. What you want to do is picture a general shape in your head, and then once you've made that general shape, you picture another general shape built on top of that. And then it keeps building, and it's like a math equation. You know, you plug in a few variables and eventually you get the result as the output. So that's kind of how I approach these things. I'm going to go ahead and use an n-gon cutter here. And what we're going to do is cut from about here. You know what, maybe a bit further in. This is just me being picky. We're going to cut to not quite the middle, just a bit before it. Then we're going to cut down this way. And then we're going to cut straight down, and then boom, something like that. I think that'll be okay. And then I'm going to press Q and sharpen. Shift click on sharpen. Drag to the right to catch those edges right there. Okay, that's not too bad. I think that'll work. I think that will be okay. What I do want to do, however, is maybe take this cutter and move it up just a bit more. I think that'll give us a bit more nice looking result. I know it seems me being very picky, but honestly the slightest movements can make or break your design. You really want to just try to move things in an area, even if it's just a bit different than the one you had before, and just kind of see what visually looks better. It's a very intuitive process, so I don't expect anyone to get it up front. It's something you develop over time. So what we're going to do now is maybe bevel these edges back here with Control B. I'm going to give it like 12 segments. The reason we want to do an even number of segments is because it's going to make the decimation process to the low poly later on in this tutorial a lot easier. So that's why I'm doing that. Cool. Now instead of doing a boolean, or it'll still be a boolean, but instead of doing a difference boolean, let's go ahead and recall the cutter and then shift bool and make this maybe an inset. We'll press the T key and kind of inset it a bit more. And by the way, whatever collection your cutter is, in this case mine's the second stack down, you can press Shift 2 to turn it off and on, which is pretty cool. Now what I also want to do is press Control tilde and make sure this HN button is turned on for harden normals, so that way whenever I apply a bevel in the Q menu, it'll actually have the harden normals turned on by default. And now we can kind of see the separation there and have a bit of depth going on. Cool. So this looks pretty good, no complaints. What I do want to do is let's just apply the boolean. We can Control click on sharpen, And then maybe bevel this, make a chamfer. That should be okay, a bit bigger though. Cool. No, it's a bit too... I know I'm being picky, I'm just trying to kind of see how it looks. I think right here will be okay. And then we'll just go ahead and unmark these edges right here, and then Control B, maybe just scroll up to about 12 segments again. That'll be good. Maybe a bit too much here. And then we'll go ahead and bevel down here. And let's just go ahead and unmark those, and then bevel again with Control B. And just do something kind of like that. Just a bit more roundness on those outside areas, kind of make it pop a bit more in my opinion. And this is a bit too far out, I think. I'm going to go ahead and go into wireframe and just select these portions and pull them back just a bit. And just kind of pan around. And this will be the general outline of our door. So looks pretty, simple right now, nothing crazy, but we're going to keep building on it. Now, first thing I want to do is add in a window. Now, before I do that, what I do think I want to do is take these edges here and then just kind of move them down a bit more. Kind of change my mind again. You know what? Maybe instead of that, what we could do instead is just move this area up to provide a bit more room. Yeah, that's much better. It just looks a bit more elongated, which is the effect I wanted. Now, what I want to do is put a window in this area. And just real quick, I'm going to give myself a bit more space for that window, I think. Yeah, I think that'll be just enough. And then we'll go ahead and go into our box cutter. We'll click from here and then go down to, I don't know, just kind of like an arbitrary placement for right now. Then we're going to cut back here, press the B key, and then we can just press the X key to run a slice. And this will be our window. And with hard ops, if you press Alt M and go to add blank material, you can change this to a glass material and kind of preview that in solid view, which is really cool. Fantastic. Okay, what I want to do now is make some sort of hinge for the door. If I go back to this example, you're going to see what really makes this door believable is these little, connections here, these little hinges over here. They don't necessarily have to make a mechanical sense, but they need to imply and look like they make some sort of mechanical sense. I don't care what anyone says. Someone can say, oh, you have to make every little bit and piece work as intended. That's BS. Whoever's telling you that is probably an engineer doing actual engineering work. For this sci-fi, game asset render type of stuff, who gives a shit? Make it look realistic. Don't worry about all the little nuts and bolts and how things are oriented. Make it look believable. That's what we're going to do here, right? So we're just going to go ahead and start by adding in a cylinder, 64 vertices, and then just press Q and sharpen, and then just kind of move it over to the side here. We can scale it down, move it over a bit more. And this will be tweaked a lot because this is just a piece that we're not quite sure what we want to do with it yet, but we definitely know it wants to be there. So I'm going to scale this up and just kind of get this roughly planted in that area. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. I just kind of want to get it in that rough location, right? Okay, pretty cool. And then maybe what we could do is move that in just a little bit. Just a little bit more, right to about there. Cool. And then what we can do is just place like little blocks and things that kind of make it look functional. So we can just start with a cube. Literally, you don't need to do anything complex here. It looks complex when you look at a picture, but it's just it's basic pieces like a cube. I'm just placing a cube right here and boom, we already have the general idea of what we want. It's really simple. So I do, however, want to move this back a bit, I think. And then maybe we could even, this is probably a bit too far over. Can move that to like here. And then we could go to this edge and then chamfer it with Control B. Just kind of get something like that. And then we'll just drop a holding bevel on it and then holding bevel on here. You know the drill. It's a bit too small. Okay, there we go. And then I want to have another one down here, so I'm going to press Shift D and then scale it on the Z a bit. And we'll just kind of, I don't want to center these because centering stuff just looks boring, and that's what kind of hurts a lot of designs in my opinion. I did that a lot myself until I realized that centering stuff was just it was not working out in terms of general design aesthetic. So I try to offset things into like the upper third or lower third or whatever, and it tends to look a bit more natural. And then I want to have another small one that's kind of like right here, but it's more like kind of on the inside. I don't know how to explain it. I'm going to go ahead and move these areas back just a bit more. And then I'm just going to kind of scale this portion. And let's see. Move that back a bit. Maybe I could even scale that down a bit and just kind of play with the sizing. S and then Shift Z. These are still a bit too tight back there in my opinion. Right about here should be fine. That looks good. Then we kind of have like a holding piece right here. We could even go in with a box cutter and run a cut, and then press I to inset, and the T key to run a solidification and get like a little detail like that, just to make it look cool. I'm also going to go ahead and take this face up here and move it up just a bit more, simply because I wanted to be honest. Probably wasn't a big deal, and could just keep moving in these areas and just playing with how it looks. You always want to pan around and see how the entire design is looking. That's going to really give you an idea of how the details are set up, if any areas are a bit too empty for no good reason, you know, things like that. So that looks good. We could even go to the pipe right here, and you know, you could drop in a loop cut and inset it or whatever, or if you just want to do it a bit more non-destructively, you could just hop in here and, you know, press the I key, run an inset, and boom, you're basically done, right? Actually, it's a bit too skinny. Let's go ahead and solidify that a bit more. There we go. And kind of like echo the shape right here. Looks good. I think we could even move in this face. Just move it back a bit more. Move this back a bit. Maybe move this edge up a little. And you're going to see this kind of mess with our boolean, so I might just delete it out, to be honest with you. We can mess with it later. And just make this a bit skinnier, a bit taller maybe. Maybe like right to about there would be good. And then we'll just go ahead and run another inset. You know, you're going to have to play with these different details a lot more than you might think, but it's fun, and once you get the right aesthetic, you're going to really appreciate yourself for doing the work. It's a bit too wide in my opinion. Just want a very skinny type of detail. So we're going to press the I key, and that'll be fine. We can move this back just a bit more so it's not intersecting with the cylinder. And there we go. I think that will suffice. Now, in my opinion, we need to scale this up a little bit more. So I'm going to take this face and move that up, and take this face and move it down. Then we're going to kind of have that effect going on, which I definitely like. Cool. Now what we definitely need is a door handle to get in and out. So before we do that, I also want to take this face and move it back just a bit. I kind of like if this wasn't so like wedged, if that makes sense. It looks a bit too far. Just kind of playing with the shapes, guys. Just really me being picky at this point. Something like that I think I'll be happy with. And just to kind of flow with the angles here, instead of having a sharp angle on these areas, we could go ahead and bevel them as well. So we're just going to Control B. And by the way, if these are ever marked in situations like this, the reason I unmark them, let me show you. So here's, if I don't unmark it, you're going to see these obvious sharps right here, these little lines. But if I unmark it beforehand, you're going to see those lines do not show up. It's a bit smoother. So that's just to avoid the sharps there. It's not really a big deal. No one's going to really see it or care, but it's just me being picky, and it doesn't take very long to do. So we're going to go ahead and make a little rounded area like that. Looks good. Okay, so for the door handle, you know what? Before we do the door handle, I just kind of thought of something. What if we put like a little cutout in the right here and kind of filled in this area? Let's do that real quick. We'll open the N-gon cutter. We're going to cut from here to here. I'm just going to keep kind of repeating that process. And we're going to have to adjust that. But for now, I just want to cut this in. And you're going to see we kind of have that effect. But I do need to take these areas and just kind of, you know, ease the tension a bit, make sure they're not too tight with the edges. That looks okay. Gonna need to move this in just a bit more. I want to make sure I'm actually like following the general angles and keeping the sizing correct and things like that. So I'm just gonna be a little bit picky with it, but that's what I do for everything on here. And now we're gonna kind of have this shape right here. So now what we can do is take these little areas and bevel them. So make a nice little rounded bevel right there, roughly the same size as these. Doesn't have to be perfect, just get it close. These two right here, we'll do one at a time, bevel, bevel, and then bevel. Just kind of going with the flow of the shape here. That looks pretty good. Now at this point I'm going to go ahead and save and then run a power save. If you don't have power save, what are you doing? It's free. Grab it. You can click on this power save button and it just saves a backup like that. So, you know, hard drive space is so cheap nowadays, guys, and the blend files aren't that big in the first place. It's a really good idea to have a bunch of backup blends to go to in exchange for a little bit of hard drive space being taken up. Like, I swear, I saw a 4 terabyte hard drive the other day for $70. 4 terabytes is going to last you, if you're like me, like years. Even with all the YouTube videos I make, I just delete out the old files and keep the videos, and my drive is usually pretty empty. So, anyways, hard drive space is cheap. Take advantage of it. Remember back when I was a kid, it was like 100 gigabytes even was like, holy cow, it's a lot. Crazy how times have changed. What I do want to do for the door handle though, we could make our own door handle, but I've been using some of the KitOps inserts recently, and you can just get the KitOps free version, or get the pro version if you want. I don't really care. But they have some really cool inserts in here that you can actually use, and there's a really cool handle that was kind of built into this pack that I liked. This little switch, so I'm going to go ahead and use this one for the handle. It looked good. I used it on my last one as well, and it just kind of matched the overall aesthetic of the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and add the insert, move it. We can rotate it. I do not know what all these things are on it. I just delete them out. I don't know what they're doing there. And I'm just going to go ahead and figure out where I want to position this. So first of all, I'm going to scale it down a bit. Second, I want to figure out where this should be placed. We can kind of move this around with the overlays turned off and see what looks natural. Obviously nowhere up here. You don't want it too low, otherwise you'd have to bend down to open it. It could be somewhere like right here, but then it kind of clashes with that angle. So I'm thinking like right about here would be a decent positioning for the handle. It's still a bit low, but I don't think it would be like end of the world. If it really bothered us, what we could do is just easily come in here and move these areas up a bit. Or even easier, we could just go into wireframe and move these areas down so it looks like it's taller, which it technically is now. And that actually looks a lot better. I like that. Cool. I also like how it kind of ends right here rather than at the bottom. Kind of a nice break of the monotony. I'm going to leave it. And as for the handle, we can just kind of slide it in. What I think I'll do is slide it into right about there. And what we could do is select this back face, Shift G, and then coplanar, and then move the rest all the way back. And we could actually make a cutout for this handle right here. That would be pretty cool. So we can just go in with the box cutter and just cut from here and just kind of, you know, match the size, cut through, and then press the B key to run a bevel and just kind of, you know, get that shape going. I do want the size of the bevel to match the roundedness of this piece, so I'm just going to go ahead and match that roundedness amount. Scale it on the Z a bit, make it have a bit of a buffer, Control A to apply the scale, and I'm just going to make this 12 segments because I want to keep this segment count even for when we decimate it later. So now we kind of have a really easy handle, and I really encourage you guys to use kitbash stuff because most of you, if you're on our Patreon, can probably model this pretty easily. You'd add in a cube, you'd move the edge out, and then you'd bevel the interior edge. I mean, can't be any simpler than that. Don't waste your time modeling stuff. that's already modeled for you, unless you genuinely don't know how to model it and you're using it as an excuse to not have to learn. In that case, then of course you should model it, but this is a simple piece, no use wasting your time. Use Kitbash stuff when you can. I've been using it recently and it's been saving me a lot of time. Cool, so now we kind of have something that looks like a door. The handle's in a good position, the window's in a pretty good position, and we kind of have this area over here on the left that's going to look really cool at the end. Alright, I'm liking where we are. I do want to make the door just a tad bit bigger because it feels to me like, although a human could be standing here, their face is probably going to be like eye level with the center of this window, and they're probably going to have to bend down a bit to reach the handle. It just kind of gives me that feeling. Not a huge deal, nothing that I think most people would really complain about, but in terms of general ergonomics, is that the word? I think it is. I don't think it makes a ton of sense, so what I could do is just ever so slightly move this down, and just by doing that we've already made the scale, the height of this, a lot more natural, right? So maybe the head height is went from here to like here, and that's a bit more reachable now. So that's just a little bit cleaner in my opinion. Makes the door a bit more robust as well, a bit taller and more of that sci-fi type of length. Pretty cool. So let's go ahead and detail this pipe over on the side just a bit more. Let's go ahead and maybe move that down. Let's make a little slice right here. It's a bit too big. Go ahead and slice that. We'll go here. Press X to slice that as well. That's actually that'll be okay, I think. This one I'm going to move down just a bit. I know I'm going kind of fast in this area, but this is just such basic operations that you can easily pause the video and kind of move this around as you please, and also feel free to add in your own detail. You don't have to follow me step by step per se, just follow the general design elements I'm adding because I do those very strategically. And once again, a shameless plug to our design course. I really recommend grabbing it because it has a lot of valuable info in there in terms of design. So it also talks about how I like think of things and how I think of placing things. So if that's something you struggle with, you might enjoy it. So I think I like how this is all positioned. It's not too bad. You could even turn on the shadow with Alt V, or just go up here and kind of get a better idea of how this looks. Gives it more of a calmer sci-fi feel. See the difference? Sometimes it'll help you visualize different areas as well. This we need to move down a little bit, and we can go back to this little slice right here and move that down with it. And this is going to be a bit more heavy on the bottom, heavy on the top, and kind of balance everything out. Awesome. So I want to show you a cool little setting here in HardOps. Go to the HardOps menu, go to the star, tick on blank matte similar to viewport. It'll add a grayscale type of color in the viewport. And if you're like me, then you might find that adding different colors to different elements on here actually helps you visualize additional details to add to your model. So check this out. If I select this and press Alt M, I can add a blank material. I can click this a few times until I find a color I want, like this. Maybe, yeah, this will be fine. Then we could go here and Alt M to add another one. Find a darker color to kind of contrast with the door. That could be okay. Maybe one more. That looks good. Maybe a bit too dark. You could even go here into the material settings under viewport display and kind of tone it down a bit if you want. So this is going to be material 002. We'll assign that here as well, just to have a nice contrast of color in this area. So this will be material 002, and maybe for the pipe we could do a third material. I generally like to go for 3 different primary materials on my objects. They tend to look a bit more balanced that way rather than using 1 or 2. This right here we can add a contrasting detail, so this is material 01, this is material, and this could be the material 02 maybe, just because of the color contrast. That's not too bad. Do the same one down here. Just notice it kind of pops a bit more that way compared if I just had this on the default, you know, which one was this? Compared to if it was just following the same color, right? See the difference there? Just pops a bit more. Also, the kit ops materials come with their own. I usually remove all these. I just get rid of all of them whenever I add in a new insert. You can go up here to the orphan data and go to materials, and then literally under materials you can delete all of them out like that. And you're going to notice that they're no longer appearing here in the material list, so just less clutter. And for this one, I'm going to give it the last material. Maybe even... Let's do this one. Kind of a tough call. We have this color and we have this color. Technically both could work fine. It's just kind of a personal preference at this point. I think the darker one pulls a bit more attention. I read this book that a subscriber mentioned to me. It was called The Design of Everyday Things. And that book is actually really good in terms of just general design thinking. Nothing over the top or complex. Quite honestly, common sense stuff that you don't really think about. So like, for example, pieces of primary importance, like a door handle, should have more attention brought to it. It should be pretty obvious where it is. And you can do that by adding in like a different color, pointing an arrow to it, whatever you want to do. And I think this color pops just a bit more and doesn't fight with these colors and just tells the viewer immediately, hey, this is where the door handle is. So just kind of my way of thinking when it comes to those things. So I hope that was helpful. I'm actually going to make this bottom one the darker material and just have this one as contrast, just because I think it pulls a bit less attention. Okay, cool. So what I want to do is have some sort of little separation piece around whatever you want to call this little hinge. So I'm going to go ahead and go in with the box cutter and just try to cut as evenly as possible. You don't have to be perfect, just try to get it to the point where you can't notice. And we'll press X and then run a different material. Maybe we could do the darker one. So in this case, material 001. Just to make this easier, I'm going to call this one dark. I'm going to call this one medium. And I'm going to call this one light, just so we know exactly which ones we are working with. Cool. So that's good. We can do the same thing down here. I could just duplicate the one I just made, but who cares? Come in here. And let's try this again. Pull this out just a bit more. Cool, and this one will be the dark material, and for whatever reason it shows as darker when this one's actually darker. I think it's because it's metallic, that's probably why. Anyways, not a big deal. Cool, so this is looking good. We're going to turn on shadow and just kind of get a better idea. This looks a lot better with the shadow turned on. Look at that. So, when I originally uploaded this render of the other door I made, people were freaking out thinking it was a crazy good design, and I will agree, I think the design was pretty good. This is probably one of my favorite designs I've made. But in terms of, the mental capacity needed to design this thing, to put the pieces together, you don't need a ton. I mean, you need to know how to add some cubes and make some little cuts and use the tools, right? But you don't need like any sort of complex modeling skills for this. You just need a bit of a design way of thinking, so if that makes sense. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, this looks good, but it just seems like something is a bit off. Like, it looks good, but it also looks bland at the same time, if that makes sense. Are you getting that vibe? Because I know I am. And the simple reason is you haven't added enough like extra detail inside of it. So basically the tertiary details. And once you do that, you're going to have just such a better design. So this is where, the design thinking process becomes pretty easy, because you don't have to think of any additional things to add in. You simply have to think about how to build on top of what you already made. And maybe for some people that's a bit harder, I'm not sure. For me, it's easier to picture what I can build on top of when I already have it. So for example, right here, what I can picture is a little cut like this. I'm not even kidding, just a cut like that kind of makes it look a bit more like a structural type of design, if that makes sense. So we could even move this down and scale it up a bit. And just by doing that, look at how much better the design looks. We could even come in here. As a matter of fact, let's just duplicate this one, so that way we don't have to miss the positioning. Scale it down, right? Run a difference boolean, and just like that, notice how it looks a bit more robust just by doing that. And my guess, I'm no psychologists, my guess is it's because we see these structural types of designs so often that our brain immediately thinks of it as more robust and more powerful. Another thing we could do is add in some little bolts. So what I'm going to do is go to our circle. We're going to add in, should we do the bolts first? Maybe, maybe before we do the bolts, I'll add in some little detail right here. I'm just kind of thinking maybe we could add in like 2 circles. We'll press the X key to run a slice, and then I can literally just run an array, press the X key for the array, and boom, just kind of do something like that. We could even, kind of scale it down and reposition it. That looks good. And then just make it a different color, maybe the medium color or light color. Wait, is it selected? There we go. That's a medium color, and this one would be the dark color. They're both pretty good. I'm going to go with the dark, I think. And we could just kind of move these down a bit more. Cool. So that one's dark, and this one is medium. Yeah, I definitely want to go with the dark, I think. I don't know what these are, but they look cool, and they have that sci-fi feel to it, so I'm going to add it in. That's why I did it. Cool, so now I want to add in some little bolts up here. Technically, you could do this in Substance Painter or with the decals, but for me, it's easier to see the design as complete rather than having to picture an incomplete design, then finish that. I've already went beyond the modeling process by the time I get to Substance. When I'm in Substance, I'm in texturing mode. I want to get the main detail added. I don't care if it takes me a few more minutes to decimate things down. It's kind of how my brain works, and I end up getting better designed as a result. So, these details, yes, you could use decals, but I kind of just want to get them in up front, So it's kind of up to you if you want to bother. Don't feel, like you have to, right? Don't feel obligated, but I think it's going to help me out, so I'm going to do it. So 2 little screw holes right there, kinda. I'm going to go ahead and press the period key, individual origins, then kind of scale that down. And then what we can do is just kind of do something like that. It's not too bad. And what I think I'm going to do is take these bottom ones and move those down a bit as well. And I think that'll be okay. Let's view it in object mode. Does it look weird? It's not terrible. I think it'll be okay. I'm not sure about it. I'm not sure, but I think it looks a bit more structural, so I'm going to leave it. Cool. Now, the next thing I want to do is make a little chamfer where this window is. This is going to really make the design pop a lot more, trust me. So instead of doing this non-destructively with the cutter and going through all that, I'm just going to go ahead and apply this cutter. A really easy way to do this with hard ops is to press Q, ever scroll. We scroll up until we find that cutter and press the F key. And then if we click and go into edit mode here, you're going to see it's been applied. Easier than finding it here in the stack. I mean, when people ask, oh, why do you use these add-ons? Well, that's why. And actually, before I do that, I need to increase the resolution of the bevel on that cutter. So let me... Cool, here we go. Let me go to ever scroll again. And on this cutter, we can go to the modifiers, right? And go to the bevel. Make this 12 segments, make it nice and round. And then we'll just go ahead and apply it again. Cool. So these connection points are a bit too tangent. Notice how we're already getting an artifact right there. Really easy fix to tab into vertex mode, join at a perpendicular orientation, and then dissolve that one out. Same for this area. This is a bit too... I mean, actually, this is probably okay. I don't think it'll be a big deal. I'm going to Alt-Shift-click these areas, deselect that edge, and then Control-B to run a chamfer. Just like that. Cool. And let's just go ahead and turn off the shadow because it's kind of annoying me right now. There we go. That is a bit tight on the edges. So what I'm going to do is select the window. I'm going to apply the boolean on the window just so that one's applied. We'll go ahead and reset the origin so I can scale it from the center. And I want to shift click on the door, tab into edit mode, and we can basically just select all this geo and just kind of reposition it down a little bit more, just so it's not, you know, as tight up against the edges. It's just going to look a bit more kind of like, I don't even know how to explain it. More breathing room, I guess, is the best way to describe it. You kind of get the feeling more than I can really explain it. So that's why I'm doing that. Even go a bit more. Cool. I like that. Now, I want to move this window in a bit, and as a matter of fact, I need to take this face here in the back and just give it a bit more room. Just kind of pull that back. And as for the window, we could move that back as well, or we could even keep it pointed out. It doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to go ahead and alt click on these edges around here and give this a nice round bevel, maybe like 12 segments, just to make it a bit more type of bit more robust. Losing my words here. Does it look like a big difference was made? Actually, yeah, that's pretty good. Notice how we have a bit more of like a separation, a shadow there. I definitely like that. Cool. And another nice way to make these areas pop a bit more, also it looks like my cavity turned off. I need to turn the cavity back on. It's just a night and day difference. What I think I'm going to do is tab into edit mode and let me take a look at this area. Okay, first of all, let's move the window back a little bit. Second of all, let's go into face mode and alt shift click these two, E to extrude, escape, and then alt S to scale in along the normals, and we'll go to about there and maybe drop the bevel. Alt S a bit more. And now we kind of have like a little outline on the inside. Notice how it looks just a bit cooler that way. Definitely like that one. And something still feels like it's missing here, and I think I know what it is. I think we need to add a chamfer on the outer portion, these outer edges. Let me also remove the sharps right here, just unmark them. They don't really need to be here. Along those spans of, those rings of faces, whatever. Gonna control click down here to the bottom and just add a chamfer. So control B. Actually, let's try both. Let's start with this. Let's start with a rounded effect. So there's that one, and this is how the chamfer will look. I think the chamfer is a bit more powerful in terms of sci-fi. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And don't worry about these bolts, we can move them. Okay, going to go ahead and dissolve that random edge out and just merge these. Cool. We can do the same thing on this portion. Going to go ahead and control B. Fantastic, really good. And I'm just going to go to ever scroll and let's see, we can move this one up a bit. As a matter of fact, we can move both of these up a bit so they're not as tight, and move this one down a bit. Feel free to pause the video if I'm going too fast there. Just a very simple movement of the pieces, so nothing crazy. Definitely looks better. Alright, fantastic. So this piece is looking a lot more like a door now. Obviously it's kind of just sitting in empty space, right? So we'll probably have to add a wall to connect it to or something. That'll make it look a bit more powerful. But for now, I'm pretty happy with the result. It looks good. And I'm just kind of, panning around thinking, where exactly could I add in some more detail? Well, first of all, I think what I could do is make the bevels on these a bit more round. So we'll go to like 12 segments, make this a bit more round. Do the same thing here. It's not too bad. Same for right here. Just make it a bit more round. Just a bit more powerful in my opinion. Notice the difference. Just kind of fills the void a little bit for lack of better explanation. Okay, I'm liking this. This might be a bit too close to the edge, so maybe I'll just move these over just a bit. Just me being picky once again. And maybe we could even go back into kit ops and see if there's any cool inserts in here we could use that kind of spark some imagination or something. Let's see. Oops. Go to the bottom here, see if there's any latches we could use. Let's try this simple hinge right here. We'll click on add insert. I'm going to go ahead and move this out. We can rotate it 90 degrees. Don't know what in the world these things are, so just delete it out. Except for this one, I guess. Now we have this hinge right here, and we could just kind of, I don't know, could try moving it down here and scaling it up. Maybe this can be like a little latch that helps kind of disassemble the door for it to be moved. Like I said, this only has to make like visual sense. It doesn't have to be like mechanically a real thing. It just has to look like it works. So don't get too caught up in how it functions. RY 180, maybe we could flip it. And now this actually looks like a latch. This could kind of, you know, cut through and kind of go into the door or something. Just some random thoughts. Can move this in. Kind of like that. It's not too bad. Definitely going to need to give it some room down here as well. So let's go ahead and select this. Maybe we have to do view align. And then just kind of cut through, give it some space. Bevel it, you know the drill. And we'll just recall that cutter and kind of tweak it because right now it's not really lining up. So first thing we'll do is move this like far over so it's kind of out of the way. And for some reason the bevel adds a weld modifier now. We don't need that really. Just going to kind of tweak this until it follows the angle of that little latch, right? There we go, looks pretty cool, right? Kind of implies that this could be like a latch to help disassemble it. You could put this however you please, really. I think it's fine where it is. That could be alright. This kind of clashes with these elements just a bit too much. I'm gonna maybe move these up a bit, and for some reason they're lined up. Maybe we just need to follow a different color. Maybe we could put remove all those materials, make this a medium color, and make this a medium color as well. There we go, that looks pretty good. I like that. And then I'm just going to move this little latch right here in just a bit more. Maybe to about there or so. And that also means we're going to have to give this cutter a bit more space. Just kind of slide that in. You don't have to do anything crazy. And now this looks realistic and believable, so that is what I like. Alright guys, so I think at this point we need to add a wall to the back of this piece just to make it look a bit more framed, a bit more robust, structured, whatever. So we're going to add in a cube, really easy, just, you know, dropping in a cube, scaling it up, move it back here a little bit, move this over, and I essentially just want this to be a bit wider than the main piece here, so we'll kind of do something like this maybe. Scale it a bit on the Y, bit on the Z. I want to have a bit of space on the Z axis though to frame it. And I think this should be enough. I think that'll be okay. So I'm going to press Control A and apply the scale, and then what I want to do is essentially come to these two edges and bevel them. Control B, give it 12 segments. Then here I want to echo these chamfers. So in order to do that, I'm going to select these two, and then we'll add in a chamfer on this side instead, just to kind of follow along with that flow. Cool, so I'm going to go ahead and bevel this. Give it 12 segments should be okay. Yeah, I think that'll be enough, and then we can just make this a bit smaller, kind of like that. And let's go ahead and give this a defining bevel here, and then we'll add the darker material to the back. I think that'll be nice. Just kind of take a look at that. Notice how it frames it a bit nicer. It kind of fills in, you know, the structure of this piece here. In my opinion, still a bit too big, so we're going to scale that in just a bit, and I think this will frame it very nicely. Cool. So let's go ahead and just right off the bat give the face right here a nice chamfer to kind of, you know, give it a bit more visual interest on the outside. Maybe we could even slide this over a bit, scale it, just kind of play with that. And I'm just going to add in some little details that kind of make it pop a bit more. So maybe we could go up here and kind of do something like that, and then mirror this to the bottom like that. And then maybe we could, let's see, do some little end-gone cuts. We'll do that. As a matter of fact, we'll just come in here and make this maybe like right there or something, then we can just mirror it to the top there and just kind of get some more structure on that side. Just for visual interest, really, that's all I'm doing. And then here on the side, what we could do is maybe add in, let's go in here with the box, maybe add in a bevel, press the Q key, and kind of get like a little notch like that. And then we're going to want to mirror this to the bottom as well. And now we kind of have that effect. Notice how we're just kind of making the back look a bit more structural in a way. It looks a bit nicer. And it only took us a few seconds of time, really. And maybe here we could just add in a little notch. All of these are just random elements that I think will make it pop a bit more. They don't necessarily have to make sense, but I mean, who cares? It just looks good, and that's the goal here. So we're just going to make that a little bit bigger. Let's move it down a bit so it's not as... Actually, it's probably fine where it is. I think that'll be okay. Maybe a bit smaller, though. That way we can move it forward, and we'll have that. Then on the bottom here, we're also going to want to add in something like that. Press enter, and we're definitely going to want to move that up a bit. I think we'll leave it for now. So notice how this is now nicely framed, and that's exactly the effect I was going for. It kind of adds in more structure, kind of shows that this thing is probably attached to something, and it just overall looks a bit nicer. So you can add in like random little details like this. You can even look at some reference mechanical pieces and just kind of copy some of the little like trussing effects and things you'll see. You don't have to be an engineer to make these things look good, you know. It's unnecessary. These are for cool renders and cool looking game assets, so that is not my concern. My concern is to make it look functional, give the illusion of function. And if you wanted to, I mean, you could probably even rig this up and make it functional. It's pretty similar to what you might see on a door anyways. Cool. So I'm definitely liking where this thing is going. I'm not going to be worried about the back because I'm not going to end up framing it that way. The back's probably just going to be attached to something. If you wanted to add details to the back, that would be up to you. I'm more concerned about the front, you know, the sides. And for some reason, we have a weird stretch going on. So instead of using a hardened normals, let's try using a weighted normal. That will usually fix the issue. Just by nature of weighted normals and hardened normals being a little bit different, I usually just use whichever one works. So this is looking good. I like it. Just going to kind of pan around here and just think about any additional little designs I could, you know, jot on. I have an idea. Let's go here to the side. Let's add in a cut like this, kind of between where that pipe is and these little hinges. Let's cut through, and then let's recall the cutter. Maybe we could scale these edges a bit. Let's go back to the medium point. That's not too bad. I think that'll... Let's go to box cutter, and we can cut the cutter to bring back this portion of the piece in the back, and then we just might want to move the cutter's cutter. A lot of words there, and kind of move that in to kind of get that effect. Just a random effect. I mean, it looks good, so why not add it? Gonna add in a few little notches here, just some additional ones. So just a small one in this area, Yeah, that's fine. Then I'm just going to go ahead and mirror that to the bottom. So Alt X, mirror, and then maybe just kind of move this over a little bit. Scale it on the X. Maybe just scale it up a bit more in general. That should be alright. Cool. Now I'm thinking maybe we could define this handle a little bit more by perhaps recalling that cutter. I'm going to press Q and then ever scroll. I'm going to take this cutter and Shift D to duplicate it. And if I go into edit mode, I can press Alt S to scale along the normals like that. There we go. And then what I could do is, I don't know, maybe run a slice right here and get that. Notice how it looks a bit more defined this way. That's kind of the effect I want. I do, however, want it to be a little bit wider here. And as a matter of fact, before I scale that along the normals, I want to make sure, or when I scale it along the normals, I want to make sure I tick this offset even button and keep it even. It might already be even, I don't know. I just always tick that on for good measure. And then if we run the slice, we should have a pretty defined area for the door. See that? Looks a little bit better. And we could even make it a different color if we wanted to. So this one seems to be the dark one. We could try medium. That looks good. You know, we could even try this with the window. I haven't actually thought about that one yet. So I might still have the cutter. I'm going to press Alt H and turn on the cutters collection. And we could just steal this cutter right here we had before, but it's kind of in the wrong location and probably a different size. So what I could do to make this easier is just control click around here, or even just Alt Shift click, and then duplicate these edges here. P to separate by selection. And then if we just click a few times, eventually we'll have that one selected. We can remove all these booleans here and the bevel as well. And then if we just press in edit mode, select everything. A to do that, and then Alt S. For some reason it's acting weird here. I think it's the origin point. Right click, set origin to geometry, and now it should be a little bit better. And we could even just kind of make a very, very small effect there, offset even, and we might have to scale this a bit on the Y as well. You could use the offset edges tool in the edit mesh tools menu. It's an add-on built into Blender. You just have to turn it on, or you could just do this, fill it, extrude it, you know the drill. And then we can just run a slice on this area as well. We'll move this to the cutters collection, and this should look a little bit better. So that one's a light, this one's dark. And you can also press Alt M and go to material scroll. So you could just go to this one, Alt M, material scroll, and scroll to, you know, whatever one you want. There's medium, there's dark. The dark one looks pretty good. And now it just looks a bit more, I don't know, it's not terrible. I guess either way would be okay. What I don't like is how it's a bit too tight to those edges. That's just me being picky. So we can press Alt S and just kind of, you know, scale that in a bit more and just play with it. Really, it's just a lot of manual work here trying to figure out what type of effect you want. But I just kind of think this looks a bit more defined that way. Maybe not for you, but I kind of like it. You could even try the lighter color and just have a general border there, but I really like how that looks. Not too bad. And kind of bring some focus over to the window here. So let's just stop here and kind of discuss the colors, and notice how the transition of colors is so incredibly important to a decent looking result. You know, you can have just a blank type of viewport like this, but to me, I'm losing my words. Jeez, guys, sorry. I'm not as creative whenever I have like a blank, you know, white color like this. If there's no color defining the different areas here, I get lost. I don't picture things as well. Maybe it's just me. Maybe you can relate. I don't know. But to me, just adding in these blank viewport materials just make things so much easier to visualize, and overall gives you a better idea of how you want the result to look whenever you texture it or add materials. I'm thinking maybe we could add some sort of little bolt right here in the corner, so I'm just going to go in with the circle cutter, and I'm going to press the J key, and then if it looks weird you can just press E to extrude it. You might have to extrude it back a little bit. We can kind of get an effect like that. I think it looks pretty cool. And then we can go ahead, and it's a bit too far in. Let me take it and just move it back just a bit. Cool. And then we can go ahead and just array this down. How do I want to do it? I'll make it a separate piece. And we'll come in here, Control plus on the numpad, or you can press Q, booleans, and then union. And you're going to have a pretty clean looking result like that. Looks a bit more, I don't know, structural, I guess. Let's try moving them to the other side, or at least one over here. It's probably going to look pretty awful, but I'm just kind of curious how it looks, so I'll just do it in edit mode so that way the boolean remains. Yeah, it looks a bit weird to me, so I'm going to undo that, and okay, I like that. I think I want to make these circles just a little bit smaller, so I'm going to press S and then Shift X to make sure it doesn't scale inwards at all. And we can do the same thing for this one. S, Shift X. Or you know what, just to make sure they're the same size, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this one that I adjusted. Cool. Now the goal of the little details here on the left is to make the left more heavy. So if you kind of imagine this door, a lot of the, function of the door is going to be concentrated here on the left. This piece here is going to be responsible for helping to swing the door open. This needs to be very strong and robust. And sometimes if it looks a bit weak, you can add in little elements like this, which kind of help to, I guess, fill the void and make it look more kind of heavy on the specific side here. So just by adding in random little details like that, it tricks the brain into thinking this is a lot stronger on the left than it is on the right, which is important in this case. And I'll just kind of show you the difference if I go in here and let me make sure I'm selecting the right piece. Remove these two. See this versus this? It looks a bit heavier now, and that's kind of the effect I'm going for. So we're getting near the end of the modeling of this piece here. This will be our high poly. We're going to eventually decimate this to a low poly, which, by the way, if you don't plan to use this as a game asset, you technically don't have to. You would just end up having to unwrap the high poly and potentially use multiple materials to allocate extra UV space so the texture resolution is good enough. But I think it's going to be a lot more powerful showing you the baking process, as well as how to decimate this down should you ever make your own. And say a client comes to you, we've had this happen to us before, we have the skill set to decimate it down and give it off, sell it as a game asset later on down the line, even if we didn't originally intend for it to be a game asset. So, these skills are pretty useful, so that's why I want to show you in this tutorial. Now what I think's missing is here in the top right, bottom right. I think we could use a bit more detail there. So I could just copy in these little structural elements here or make a new one. I'm just going to go ahead and mirror. So we'll go to Everscroll and scroll to these cutters. Shift click on this piece, Alt X, and then we can mirror it like that. And I just kind of think that fills in the void a little bit more, makes it kind of more detailed in a aesthetically pleasing way, not a way that just looks cluttered. So I definitely like that. I'm kind of wondering, should we do a similar element over here? Probably not, because I don't want to kind of have a monotonous type of theme to this. I want to have a very uneven symmetry, as in, this piece is clearly not going to be symmetrical to this side. I really want to keep that aesthetic. So we could put like a little something here on the side, or we don't necessarily have to. It's probably not super essential. I'm just thinking what we could put. What if we scrolled to these pieces, we moved it over, and then we scaled it a bit? How would this look? It's actually not too bad, but I do think I want to actually have some sort of piece kind of going through here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the cutter. I'm going to come through here, double click, and that's going to cut the cutter and give us a very similar effect to this side without keeping it, you know, the same type of element. It looks very, it's very clearly different here than it is here. We have two right here, it's wider, and this one just a bit of a different element. So I think this looks pretty good as a matter of fact, and kind of gives it more of a natural feel to it. So I'm trying to think what else we could add. I don't think there's really anything left. I'm definitely happy with how this looks, and I can already begin to picture how this is going to come together in Substance Painter. So I'm really excited to get that done, but I want to make sure there's not any little details I think I missed that I might regret not putting in later. So let's go ahead and just kind of pan around here. So what I did notice is that this little cylinder right here is kind of just suddenly intersecting with the door. Nobody's going to really notice it, and honestly probably won't care, but it's going to bother me. So what I think I'm going to do is just kind of cheat it a little bit. We could just come up here to the top and just double click and then just kind of slice it that way. And then we could just move it right up against the wall there so you can kind of see the clear transition. So not too bad. There we go. Okay, cool. And maybe I could come to the top and add a little chamfer just to kind of make it a bit more visually appealing on the top. The bottom should be fine because we have a little slice here. And as you're going to see, it kind of, we're going to need to recall the cutter here, and also let's scale it on the Z, and also run it through that bottom piece as well. And through this piece, because these are all separate pieces here. Okay, pretty cool. And then maybe what I could do is just come in here, I could inset, kind of extrude this down. Nah, that looks weird. I don't like that. Let me turn on the snapping tool here, and just kind of, maybe we'll just go in the center randomly. I think I'm just going to leave that empty. Who cares? Not a big deal. Okay, not too bad. I think this will be believable enough, and that's exactly what we're going for. Now this box, is that intersecting? Not really. At this point I'm just being a little bit picky, but if you really want to kind of show the, you know, that it's not merged together or anything, you could just ever so slightly pull it outside of the face, and you're going to kind of see a clear transition there, which is pretty cool. Do the same thing for the bottom. Okay, awesome. And I think this whole entire area here is pretty much done. I know what we could do to kind of finish off the rest of this piece. Let's go right here, go to box cutter, go up here, turn on the snap tool for box cutter, and if we hold control, we can click the dot and keep holding, and if we want to scale this, we can hold the alt key as well. So basically what you're doing is you're holding control, you're holding left click, and then you're holding alt to kind of scale it a bit more manually. Kind of a bit tricky, but you'll get used to it. And then we're just going to kind of pull through here. We'll press B to bevel it. And then what I want to do is recall that cutter right there. I don't want to bevel in the back. There's not really a need for that. And I also want to make this like 12 segments or something. Cool. And then what we can do is press Q, go to settings, and if we shift click on shade solid, this will duplicate the cutter, make it a solid view, and then move it outside of the cutters collection, which is pretty cool. So now if I press shift 2, you're going to see only the cutter gets hidden and not this piece because it's no longer in the cutters collection. Now we have a bevel that controls the roundedness. I want to make a second bevel for the edges, so we'll hold control and add in a bevel, another one which is by default 30 degrees here, and then we'll do that and give this a medium. Cool, and we could even move this out just a little bit more, just kind of define it. We could even try like a chamfer on here. We're gonna have to apply the main bevel though. I don't know how it'll look, I'm just gonna see. You could probably go either way with it, it doesn't matter too much. I'm just gonna leave it as is and then just move it back a little, and that should be good enough. So now we kind of have this kind of sitting on the inside of this hole here. See that? Kind of have a nice defining ridge there. Alright, that's it for part 1. Like I said, guys, make sure you pick up our hard surface ebook. It's going to have a ton of cool stuff in there, and it's always useful to read through it. You'll probably learn some stuff you didn't know before. Anyways, I'll see you tomorrow for part 2, where we're going to be doing the high to low poly decimation.